Greece and Rome. The period known as classical antiquity began with the emergence of the city-states of ancient Greece. This is what they taught me in school. They didn't. Later, the Roman Empire came to dominate the entire Mediterranean basin, meaning that the Romans took it from the Greeks. The migration period of the Germanic people began in the late 4th century AD and made gradual incursions into various parts of the Roman Empire. This is what the start of the fall of Rome, and also put Europe into the Dark Ages for 1,000 years. Stolen Legacy is a book written in 1954 by George G. James. George G. James argues that the philosophical ideas of ancient Greece were actually derived from ancient Kemet. James contends that the Greeks traveled to Kemet and borrowed heavily from Kemetic thought, but failed to acknowledge their debt. This plagiarism, according to James, has led to the misconception about the origins of Western philosophy, giving credit to the Greeks for ideas that truly belong to the Kemetians. As I was putting this together, when I took a pause, sometimes I go on Instagram just to clear my head, and this is what I found.
I like learning about history and different cultures, and I learned something about white people. I learned that we invented credit, like taking credit for things that like maybe you shouldn't have. This is how it started. I think like one day we saw another race with some really cool invention, and we got a little nosy, and we were like, "Hey, who invented this thing?" They were just like, "Well, it doesn't matter who made it. What matters is we can all use it and appreciate it." And we were like, oh. Well, if it doesn't matter who made it, let's just say white people made it. I'm going to write white man on the bottom of this. And we've used this logic for many inventions in history, like, I don't know, like rock and roll, Jesus, you name it. And that logic is kind of how white people got to this country. Like one day we were like, hey, Indians. And they were like, who's that? We're like, it's you guys. Hey, Indians, whose land is this? And they were like, what? Nobody owns this land. And we were like, oh. Well, if nobody owns this land, let's just say white people own this land. As a matter of fact, you need to get off my land.
Only a leucoderm could have done that joke. All right, let's go back. We're almost done, guys. We have, I think, one more slide. Stolen Legacy on page 59. The history of the following ancient theory of the four qualities and four elements provides the world with the evidence of the Kemetic origin of the doctrines of A, opposites and contraries, B, change or transmutation, and C, the life and function of the universe is due to the four elements: fire, water, earth, and air. One, this ancient theory was expressed by a diagram formed by outer and inner squares. The corners of the outer squares carried the name of the elements fire, water, earth, and air. The corners of the inner square being at the midpoint of the sides of the outer square carry the four fundamental qualities: the hot, the dry, the cold, and the moist. The diagram explains that fire is hot and dry, earth is cold and dry, water is cold and moist, and air is hot and moist. Accordingly, water is an embodiment of cold and moist qualities, and when the cold quality is replaced by the hot quality, the element water is changed into the element air and the hot and moist qualities. Consequently, transmutation is definitely implied in the teachings of this symbol. It is the oldest teachings of physical science and has been traced to Kemet as far back as 5000 BC. This is in Stolen Legacy on page 59. Cold, hot, complementaries. Moist, dry, complementaries. When the cold and moist come together, they create the element water. Now, of course, you're not going to see an animated picture of water in the book. When the moist and hot come together, they create what the element we call air. When the hot and dry come together, they create fire. When the cold and dry come together, they create earth. The Julian calendar in 46 BCE. We went from 200,000 years all the way up to the Julian calendar, which is the calendar that you have on your wall. Bet you didn't know that it was named after Julius Caesar. Here we focus mainly on the calendar used in the Roman Republic, 509 to 527 BCE. Very, very recent, also known as the Republican calendar. I wonder if they have a Democratic calendar too. It is the earliest calendar system from Rome for which we have historical evidence. It was used until 46 BCE when it was replaced by the Julian calendar, inspired by who? Cleopatra. Julius Caesar, that's one of the reasons why he was killed, because he got with Cleopatra. She had his nose wide open. He went back to Rome and declared himself king of all eternity. And the Roman Senate said, "Oh, hell no. You better get that crap out of here." But we wasn't taught that's why he was killed. In school, matter of fact, in school, they rarely talked about Cleopatra's inspiration to him for revamping the Roman calendar, making it into the Julian calendar.
The Romans in the days of the Republic had 12 months of varying amounts of days, the same as we do today. However, their calendar still only added up to 355 days. And the religious officials in Rome had extreme power over the lengths of months and years. People being people, the pontiffs would often use the calendar as a political tool, shortening or lengthening politicians' terms by literally taking and giving days. This calendar fiddling would mess with people's ability to keep the days straight, and added to the issues already present in the Roman calendar. Not only that, but the Romans were really weird in the way they actually discussed dates in day-to-day life. Anyone who has read Shakespeare's Julius Caesar knows that Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March. But what does that actually mean? Romans would count their days based off 3 key dates in every month: the Calendae, the Nones, and the Ides. These 3 dates were used as reference points that were counted forward or backward from in order to represent specific days. The Ides were the middle of each month, and either occurred on the 15th or the 13th, depending on the month. The Nones were on the 5th or the 7th of each month. Calenday was on the 1st day of the month, and that is where we get the word calendar from. Unfortunately, the solar year isn't actually 365 days long. It's 365.2422 days long. This horrible number practically necessitated reform, something which the Egyptians realized pretty quickly, considering Ptolemy III was already recommending adding a leap day every 4 years in 238 BC. But Egyptians are nothing if not stubborn. Jump forward 12 Ptolemies and 200 years, and Egypt still hadn't adopted the leap year, until Julius Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, you may know him as Augustus, decided enough was enough. He just conquered Egypt and forced them to have a leap day every 4 years. Strangely enough, though, the reform that Julius Caesar made actually came from Egypt, not Rome. In 48 BC, a Sicilian named Apollodorus entered Julius Caesar's apartment in the dead of night, with a rolled-up blanket on his back. Once unfurled, inside was a 21-year-old girl who would, incidentally, change the calendar forever. Her name was Cleopatra. She had recently been ousted from her throne by her brother in a coup, and was coming to ask for Caesar's help in restoring her to power. Needless to say, Caesar was quickly seduced by her beauty, and he agreed to help. He ordered her brother, Ptolemy XIII, to co-rule with Cleopatra, and in celebration, Cleopatra threw a huge party. According to the Roman poet Lucan, Caesar first heard of the Egyptians' solar calendar from a scholar at this party, and this inspired him to reform the Roman calendar once he returned home. In 46 BC, Julius Caesar gathered the best living philosophers and mathematicians in order to reform the Roman lunar calendar into an Egyptian-style solar calendar. Ultimately, they ended up just agreeing with Ptolemy III, and determined that the year should be 365 days long, and every 4 years an extra day should be added. In order to actually achieve this reform, Caesar added an extra 67 days to that year, and called it the last year of confusion. But everyone else just called it the year of confusion. Luckily for us, though, they were mostly right about the length of the year, and the calendar now drifted by only a single day every 134 years. The Romans in the days of the Republic had 12 months of...
In later classes, we will go in depth to who was Cleopatra. She was not a black woman. I'm going to say that right now. There was actually 8 Cleopatras. The Cleopatra that is mostly talked about was the 7th Cleopatra and the last Cleopatra. The word Cleopatra is not an African word. It is a Macedonian, that's the ancestors of the Greek, title for a royal woman. The Arab star names, because remember, after the Germans, the Germanic tribes sacked Rome, Rome went into a dark ages for years. The Arab migration to the region of Northwest Africa lasted from the 7th to the 17th century, 1,000 years. So from Arabia, they went into Egypt. Mind you, there was very little people there because Rome had been sacked by the Germanic tribes, and the Germanic tribes were not crossing the river at that time. Or not the river, I meant the Mediterranean Sea. Mm-hmm. So they traveled west and further west. Now, mind you, these demarcations were not there at the time. These demarcations came in at the Van Dam Conference in Europe, where they had a map and they divided up Africa among themselves, never even visiting the area. So these demarcations are just our modern way of talking about areas in this region. This region is called Maghreb, from the Arabic language. It included modern-day Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, which comes from the word Moors, Western Sahara, and Mauritania. The word Maghreb actually just means west. And these are the symbols that they use on their flag, showing you that the Arabs were into astronomy. Islamic astronomy played a significant role in the revival of ancient astronomy following the loss of European knowledge during the Dark Ages, notably with the production of Latin translation of Arabic works during the 12th century. So the Arabs, it's interesting that these Arabs were not all Muslims, but they're called Arabs because they came from Arabia. But the Arabs, these folks were what today we would call polyglots. They were able to read Greek and Latin, and they translated many of the Greek and Latin works into the Arabic language. Remember, they were in the Dark Ages during the time that the Arabs were doing this. The Dark Ages lasted from 500 AD to 1500 AD. A significant number of stars in the sky, such as Aldebaran, Altair, Al is an Arabic prefix meaning the, and Deneb, and astronomical terms such as Alidad, Azimuth, and Nadir are still referred to by their Arabic names. A large corpus of literature from Islamic astronomy remains today, numbering approximately 10,000 manuscripts scattered throughout the world, many of which have not been read or cataloged. Even so, a reasonably accurate picture of Islamic activity in the field of astronomy can be reconstructed. What we're saying here is that most of the stars that we can name from star charts are Arabic words. The Gregorian calendar. Another calendar reform was introduced by Pope Gregory VIII in 1582 as a modified version of the Julian calendar. They just couldn't get it right. This is what the person looked like. If you saw him walking down the street, you would think he was homeless.
In Western culture, we use the Gregorian calendar, and as you'll see in this moment in history, the calendar is massively influenced by Christianity. Let's explore the history and background of the calendar of Western civilization, the Gregorian calendar. Now, to know something about the calendar, we have to know a little something about the man for which it is named, Pope Gregory XIII. Gregory reigned over the Catholic Church during one of the most tumultuous times in Christian history, the 16th century, when the Protestant Reformation began to weaken the tight grip that the Church had held over Europe throughout the Middle Ages. Gregory himself was a controversial figure. He is one of the few popes in history to have been known to have fathered a child during his life. He also lived a very long time for someone in this time period. He was born in 1502 and died in 1585, living to the age of 83. Sadly, Gregory was also infamous for supporting the terrible St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of 1572, where French Catholics murdered French Huguenots or Protestants in Paris, the same year Gregory was elected to the throne of St. Peter. But his most famous and influential act of his life and his papacy was his authorization of a new Western calendar. Now, up until this time in history, Europe had used the Julian calendar, created by the Roman dictator Julius Caesar in 46 BC. This Roman influence is where we get the names of our months, and these names survived the crossover. Now, Gregory's main reason for changing to a new system has to do with two very important things. The first being the scientific revolution of the times. Scientists realized that Julius's original calculation for matching the calendar year with the solar year was off slightly, so a recalibration was necessary. Now, the second reason has to do with this recalibration, but also much more so in keeping with Christian holy days and keeping them in their right place. Namely, it was the celebration of Easter. Gregory realized that the celebration day of the Lord's resurrection, meant for centuries to be celebrated near the spring equinox, was moving further and further away from that date with each passing year. Gregory's goal was to move Easter back to its original date of celebration, and this was the initial idea that spawned the creation of a new calendar. So in 1582, Gregory instituted his new calendar in the Papal States and other Catholic regions in Europe. Many Catholic nations picked it up right away, but Protestant-denominated nations were not so quick. England, for example, did not formally institute the Gregorian calendar until the year 1752, only 24 years before the birth of the United States. Russia did not adopt the new calendar until 1918. Of course, we use the Gregorian calendar here as well in the United States.
So even though it may have seemed insane to the Roman people, or to Catholic countries in the late 1500s, calendars can be changed. And Pope Gregory XIII did just that. He gathered a group of genius scientists and doctors to try and create the most accurate calendar possible. Eventually, they found a relatively elegant solution. Every year divisible by 4 should be a leap year. Unless the year is also divisible by 100, then it is not a leap year. However, if that year is divisible by 400, then ignore this, and it's still a leap year. This reform would mean that instead of drifting by 11 minutes each year, the calendar would drift by only 26 seconds. In order to fix the current date, though, of course, just like in Caesar's time, people would have to suffer with a day change. So in every Catholic country, the day after October 4th, 1582, was October 15th, not October 5th. And also, just like in Rome a millennia and a half earlier, people did not like this. Everything from debt deadlines, to holidays, to birthdays were changed. Even the Pope's birthday changed from January 1st to January 11th. Mobs arose around Europe, angry about their 10 lost days. And many, many countries did not adapt to this new calendar quickly. England wouldn't use the Gregorian calendar until 1752, and Greece was the last European country to hold out, finally adopting it in 1923. China didn't adopt the Gregorian calendar until 1949. In a strange twist of fate, though, the last major challenge that the calendar would face would not be because it wasn't accurate enough, but because it was too accurate. Today, the year is determined in the same way that the second is, using an atom of cesium. All atoms have oscillations that can be accurate.
In Western culture, we use the Gregorian
So even though it may have seemed
Is anybody there?
I'm sorry.
I'm here.
I'm sorry. I had my microphone off.
Okay.
Let me go back. All right. Starting in 1986, Sister Riketti Amen, who now lives in Mississippi, was in New York, and she has been studying the Kemetic culture for years, and she decided she was working with a group of people called ASCAT, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization. And they asked her to come up with a calendar. I, at the time, was only the artist for the calendar. I was not as deep into it as I am now. So 40 years later, this is what you're getting. You guys are still a part of the resurrection of this calendar. It is a congregate of the solar cycle, winter solstice, spring equinox, summer solstice, and the fall equinox, represented by these figures here. The lunar cycle is also on this calendar, represented by the lunar cycle. The seasons are also represented on this calendar, represented by these four women in the corners. Winter, spring, summer, and fall. And it also incorporates the star cycles, which is in the middle of the calendar. Let me blow it up so you can see it. And that ends our class.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Now, we had to go into all of this historical background because as we go further into the calendar and we break down this image of the calendar, which I came up with 10 years ago and had to use it to make sure that it works. It is a perpetual calendar, meaning that it can be used for any year, which later classes, we're going to break down everything, but we had to give you the background on who started this whole situation of charting stars, charting the moon, charting the sun, charting the seasons. Any questions? Comments?
I'll have lots more. That was amazing. Thank you. All that history is just rich. So where will I be able to watch it again and watch your presentation one more time so that then I can, I digest it, because I like to watch things over and read them over and